Welcome to video number 3 in my series about the full rule set of the Guns of Gettysburg, a game by Rachel Simmons, published by Mercury Games. And after videos 1 and 2, you know how to move your troops and how to attack the enemy. That should be fine for a wargame, but it's not enough. At the end of video number 2, we declared that in a combat, when one side has won, the fight is over. But it's not totally true, because when one side has won, the other side has still to withdraw. Whatever happens after any combat, one side will withdraw. Withdrawal after a battle is mandatory. And let's see first what happens if the attacker loses the battle. He just declared and resolved the battle, he lost, and because it's still his turn, he can and he must withdraw immediately, before moving or attacking with any other unit, and only blocks that actually attacked can and must withdraw, the ones which now occupy the defender's position. On the other hand, if the defender loses, because it's not his turn, he cannot move his units, so his blocks stay where they are, on the same positions than enemy units, and they will withdraw later as soon as they can, that is, at the beginning of their own following turn. And note that from this point on, the attacking player goes on with his turn, and defending units still cast their fields of fire even if on the same position as an enemy unit. They still block enemy movement until they actually withdraw. But more than that, at the beginning of his turn, the defender must withdraw all his units on the same position as an enemy, but also all his units adjacent to such an enemy and all units whose rear is in such an enemy's field of fire. In other words, like in this example, if red unit wins the battle, it pushes its target out of its position, but also all adjacent units and all units whose rear lies in its field of fire. A well-designed attack can thus dig a large hole in a defense line. Fine, but what is exactly a withdrawal move? Where can you withdraw and how far? When a unit withdraws, it can move 1 or 2 steps, but it cannot go anywhere. First, it must go to the rear. That means that the first area it crosses must be its rear area. But also, it must steadily move away from the enemy unit that beat it. Steadily move away, what does it mean? That means increasing the separation index every time it moves. The separation index is 0 if both units share the same location, 1 if they are adjacent, 2 if the withdrawing unit is in its enemy's field of fire, and 3 if not. This separation index must increase, but if it is not possible, it can stay the same, and in no way can it decrease. So, in this example, red unit attacks and loses the battle. As it is the attacker, it must withdraw immediately. And at the beginning of its withdrawal, it is on the same position as the unit that beat it, so the separation index is 0. The first area it can cross must be its rear area, so its first move can bring it on only 3 possible positions. 2 of these positions are adjacent to the enemy, so their separation index is 1. The last position is not adjacent, but it is in a blue unit's field of fire, separation index 2. Red unit must increase its separation index, so it can freely choose any of the 3 withdrawal positions. Let's suppose it moves here, and note that it doesn't have to go back to the position it attacked from. And thus, red unit spent 1 step for its withdrawal. It can stop here. It doesn't have to spend 2 steps. But if it wants to go further away, it can now spend a second step to any of these positions. Let's check the separation indexes. Most of these positions are out of blue unit's field of fire, so separation index 3. But the last position is adjacent to blue unit, separation index 1. Red unit is actually on a position adjacent to a blue unit with a separation index of 1. And because it must increase its separation index if possible, it cannot go to the position with a separation index of 1. It must choose between the 4 other ones. Let's say it withdraws like this. Okay, later in the game, a red unit is in a pretty bad situation. A blue unit attacks it, and red loses. Because it is blue player's turn, red unit doesn't withdraw yet, but wait for red player's turn. So, blue players go on with his turn, and then it's red player's turn. His red unit starts its turn on the same position as a blue unit, so it must withdraw. For its first step, only 2 positions are possible, but there is a problem. When withdrawing, a unit cannot enter a position that lies between the same 2 areas than the starting position. At the beginning of its withdrawal, red unit starts between these 2 areas, so it cannot withdraw to this position that lies between the same 2 areas. Fine, so no choice. Red unit must withdraw to this position. It goes from a separation index of 0 to a separation index of 1, so that's okay, it can do that. So far, red unit spent 1 step of movement. It can stop here or withdraw 1 more step. But no, because a withdrawing unit must stop its movement as soon as it enters a position adjacent to an enemy that was not adjacent at the beginning of the withdrawal. So, if it becomes adjacent to a new enemy it was not adjacent to. At the beginning of its movement, red unit was on the same position as its attacker and it was adjacent to this other blue unit. So, these 2 blue units don't count. But, after its 1-step movement, red unit becomes adjacent to a new blue unit. A unit that was not adjacent at the beginning. So, red unit must stop here. It cannot spend its 2nd step to move any further. And when a unit ends its withdrawal adjacent to the enemy, it incurs 1 loss. So here, red unit, as it is for example a 2 gray flag unit, becomes a 1 flag unit. Unless there's an exception, otherwise it wouldn't be funny. Unless it was already adjacent to the same enemy unit at the beginning of its move and it spent 2 steps. So here, it's red unit's turn. Blue player did attack it during its own turn and won. Now, red unit must withdraw, but this time there is an obstructed symbol toward the area it must cross, its rear area. So, it can do the same withdrawal move as before, but because it costs its full 2-step allowance, it doesn't incur any loss. Beware, if another blue unit is here, red unit incurs a loss because it ends adjacent to an enemy unit it was not adjacent to at the beginning of its move. If a unit must withdraw but cannot without increasing its separation index, it is eliminated. For example, here is a somewhat confusing situation. Blue player attacked during his turn and won the battle. Now, it's red player's turn and he must withdraw his red unit. But he must also withdraw his adjacent unit because all units adjacent to a successful enemy must withdraw. And as you see, he can withdraw one of his units but not the other one. And so this unit that cannot withdraw is eliminated. But beware, it is not just removed from the game right away. No, it incurs losses until it is eliminated. So here, for example, it is first replaced by a 1 flag unit and then this 1 flag unit is eliminated. The difference being that a 1 flag unit has been eliminated in the process. And then you know how to withdraw. So now please remember, in my video number 1, I told you that sooner or later all units will stop each other with their fields of fire. And so, after some strategical movement, both players end up with some kind of front line and no unit able to move. And in my video number 2, I told you that one possible solution to break such a frozen situation is to attack. Fine, but sometimes you cannot or you don't want to attack and you would like to get your units away without attacking. You would like to step back instead of pushing forward. And this is possible. There is a kind of withdrawal you can do before combat. A movement where your units don't withdraw because they just lost a battle, but they withdraw to avoid such a battle. This is called a voluntary withdrawal. This is a special kind of movement by which you can withdraw any unit that is adjacent to an enemy block or in an enemy field of fire. In this example, all 3 red units are in blue units' fields of fire, so they can voluntarily withdraw. Note that if they are neither adjacent nor in an enemy field of fire, they can just use regular movement and don't need this special voluntary withdrawal. Voluntary withdrawal is handled exactly like an after-battle mandatory withdrawal, but with 4 steps available. So here, red player, after declaring a voluntary withdrawal, can move his units as long as they increase their separation index. Because they all have a separation index of 2, they all must leave the enemy field of fire if they can. More precisely, these units can stay where they are. They can choose to not move at all, but if a unit chooses to move, it must increase its separation index and, in this example, leave any enemy's field of fire. Red player can choose to step back like this. 2 of his units increased their separation index to 3, and the leftmost unit spent 3 steps. No problem, it can spend up to 4 steps. Note that red player decided not to move his rightmost unit. He can do that. But wait. If such a movement is possible, that means that your units in an enemy field of fire are in fact not stopped at all. And so why did I bother you with all these rules about fields of fire and blocked units if it was so easy to break free and move anyway? Well, that's because voluntary withdrawal is not at all that easy. In order to do a voluntary withdrawal movement, you must declare a withdrawal general order. What are general orders? In the Guns of Gettysburg, you, the players, are Robert E. Lee or George Meade in command of an entire army. And one of your main control levers is to assign to your whole army a general order. There are 3 possible general orders: hold, attack, and withdraw. And at any time during the game, your army operates under one of these 3 general orders: hold, attack, or withdraw. And this general order applies to all units in your army. Hold is the default order. At the beginning of the game, both players start under Hold General Order. To keep it short, let's say that units under Hold General Order behave like I told you in my first video. They can all move 2 steps per hour, let's say 2 steps per turn for now, but they are blocked by adjacent enemy units or their fields of fire. A unit under Hold General Order cannot attack and cannot do voluntary withdrawal. And that's all. This is the Hold General Order, the simplest one. But, as I told you, under this order, your units will quickly be blocked by the enemy line and unable to move any further. Thus, video number 2, you will switch to the Attack General Order. Under the Attack General Order, your units can attack. Simple. Under other orders, your unit just cannot attack. Under this attack order, they can. Units can still move normally as long as they are not blocked, and when they are blocked, they can attack. Okay, so attack order is the same thing as a hold order, but your units can attack. So why would I not always give this order to my troops? Because if you put your army under an attack general order and none of your units actually attack this turn, you lose half your tokens at the end of the turn. Half your tokens, fractions rounded up. So if you have 3 tokens, you lose 2. These tokens are not eliminated from the game, they just go to your discard pile, and if you have no tokens in hand at all, you cannot choose this general order. And what it means is that when you declare an attack general order, you'd better actually attack during the following turn. You cannot declare an attack general order without any plan, just in case you would have any opportunity next turn. No, if you do that, you will quickly lose all your tokens. So let's recap. During your turn, you do what you have to do with your units, and at the end of your turn, you must choose a general order for your next turn. And both players do the same. As we will see, usually, Union player is the first player. And note that at the end of his turn, a player, let's say the Union player, chooses his general order, then he watches his opponent play his own turn, and only after that, the next turn begins, and Union player plays again under his new general order. That means that when you choose your general order, you don't know yet what your opponent will do, and when you know, it's too late to change your general order. Okay, and now that you see the turn sequence, let me add that each player, at the beginning of his own turn, draws one token. You remember this panel we built in my previous video. At the beginning of his turn, a player draws one token. In fact, we will see very soon that it can be more complicated than that, and that sometimes players will be able to draw several tokens. But for the moment, let's keep it simple. What's important here is that when you choose the attack general order, you don't draw any token at the beginning of your turn. And that's the big problem you have to deal with when you attack. Because remember, every time you attack, you must play a number of tokens at least equal to the number of units you attack with. So, from your hand of 8 tokens, you will quickly lose 2, 3, 4 or whatever tokens. And if you stay under attack general order to go on with your attack next turn, you won't draw any new token and you'll have to attack with a reduced hand. So, as you understand, by this mechanism, you cannot go on attacking over and over turn after turn. Attack consumes tokens. And you need to pace your campaign between moments of assault and moments of rest, when you will go back to hold general order to start drawing tokens again and replenish your hand. Fine, and before going on, just a few things about the attack general order. First, I said that if you choose this general order, you are somehow meant to attack. And if you don't, you must discard half your tokens. But in the meantime, between the moment you declare your attack order and the next turn when you are supposedly meant to attack, there is your opponent's turn. And if during this turn your opponent attacks you, any of your units, that counts as an attack even if in fact you are defending. And so, at the end of your own turn, you don't have to discard tokens. And this is true also if no attack is possible, or if any enemy unit has withdrawn. So if you declare an attack general order in the hope of attacking the enemy line in front of you, and this line withdraws and gives up the field, you don't lose any token if you don't attack. This happens a lot at the very beginning of the game, when the first Confederate units to arrive on the map are slowed down by Union cavalry units that keep withdrawing every time the Confederate army tries to attack them. Okay. Thanks to this chapter about general orders, at last we start to see how a turn unfolds. But what are more precisely these two large unit actions blocks? To put it simply, during his turn, a player can move his units. We have seen how to move units, but we've also seen that attack and withdrawals are two special types of movement. So, we can say that each player can choose between three possible types of movement: regular movement, attack movement, and withdrawal movement. One given unit can make only one movement during the turn. And because attack and withdrawal are movements, if a unit attacks, it cannot do a regular movement at the same turn. And movements always happen in this order: withdrawal first, then attacks, then regular movements. Red player declared an attack general order at the end of his previous turn. So now he is under attack general order and he can attack blue unit. He attacks it, and this is a type of movement. Okay, now let's suppose red unit loses its attack. It must immediately withdraw. This is immediate and this is a part of the attack, so red unit withdraws. But red player's turn is not over, and after the attack step, red unit should be tempted to move that same red unit as part of a regular movement. It is not blocked by any enemy field of fire and should be able to move, no? No, it cannot, because it already made an attack during that same turn. Attack is a type of movement and a given unit can do only one movement per turn. Now, a slightly different example. It's blue player's turn, and at the end of his turn, he declares a hold general order. Then, during the ensuing red player's turn, red unit attacks blue unit and wins. When the defender loses, it does not withdraw immediately and waits for its own turn. So, red player's turn ends with both units sharing the same position. Next turn, blue player. And he begins with withdrawal movements, even if blue player's general order is hold. His blue unit, being in the same position as an enemy unit, must withdraw. It withdraws according to the rules, fine. And now, thanks to the woods and their obstructed symbols, blue unit is not in red unit's field of fire anymore and could do a regular movement. But no, because only one movement per unit per turn. Blue unit already did a withdrawal movement, so it cannot do a regular movement anymore. Okay, and note that the game has no card nor token to show player's current general order. So I recommend you craft simple cards in order not to forget what player declared what general order for his next turn. A for attack, H for hold, and W for the third possible order, withdrawal. At last, we can close the bracket and go back to what was our subject at the beginning of this video, withdrawal. When a player chooses the withdrawal general order, all his units adjacent to an enemy unit or in its field of fire can make a 4-step withdrawal movement. Usually, units withdraw as a result of a lost battle, as involuntary withdrawal, whatever is general order. But with the withdrawal general order, a unit can voluntarily withdraw, that is, withdraw without any battle just to get away from an enemy field of fire. Still, a unit with this general order can do regular movement. For example, a unit that is neither adjacent to the enemy nor in its field of fire cannot withdraw, but it can do a regular movement. But beware, because you declared a withdrawal general order, that means that nevertheless you cannot move any unit to a position adjacent to an enemy or in its field of fire. Under a withdrawal general order, you cannot withdraw somewhere and close in on the enemy elsewhere. And of course, your units cannot attack. Fine, and even if regular movement is limited under withdrawal general order, you should declare this general order even with no intention of really moving your army backwards, but just in case to keep the right to withdraw if things go wrong. But that's not so easy, because when you declare a withdrawal general order at the end of your turn, you must immediately discard half your tokens, fractions up. And thus, withdrawal is a defensive order that keeps you away from the offensive for some turns afterward by shortening your tokens reserve. Under the withdrawal general order, you keep on drawing one token at the beginning of your turn, but anyway, you need some turns before recovering your full hand. And here are the three possible general orders. Hold, the basic one, to move when not too close to the enemy and to complete and optimize your tokens hand. Attack, to attack, quite simple, and withdraw to break the lock and recover some freedom of movement, away from the enemy line. Fine, this looks nice, but wait, there is a little more to say about the withdrawal general order. When a player chooses this order at the end of his turn, he automatically becomes the first player. So, if you are the Union player and declares a withdrawal general order, this doesn't change anything because from the beginning of the game, Union player is the first player. But if you are the Confederate player, you play your turn, you end it by declaring a withdrawal general order for your next turn, and then, because you become the first player, you immediately play again next turn as the new first player. Okay, so declaring a withdrawal general order allows the second player to momentarily play twice in a row, fine, but not a big deal. In fact, becoming the first player changes the game a lot more than that, and this has something to do with the length of a turn. Until now, we assumed that each turn was 1 hour long, but as we will see, it's not always the case. At the bottom of the map, a track shows every hour of the day from 7 a.m. until the night, then the day after from 5 a.m. And the same for the 3 days of Gettysburg from July the 1st to July the 3rd. And at the very beginning of the game, July the 1st, 7 a.m., the turn marker is on the first box. The first turn lasts 1 hour. And at this time, there are only 2 units on the map, the 2 Union cavalry units from Buford's division. And from then, on later turns, randomly, reinforcement units enter the map. We will see reinforcement rules later. Okay, now let's suppose we are in this situation. Hancock's brigade just entered the map, so red player has 4 units and blue player 5. The duration of a turn is equal to 1 hour plus 1 bonus hour per group of 3 units of the player who have the least units on the map. So, here, the player with the least units in play is a red player, and with 4 units, he has only 1 full group of 3 units, and thus, this turn's duration is 2 hours, 1 plus 1. A second end turn marker is used to show this duration. Later in the game, with 11 blue units and 12 red units, blue player is the player with the least number of units. 11 units give 3 groups of 3, and so the turn lasts 1 hour plus 3 equals 4 hours. Fine, a turn can last several hours, but what does it change? Mainly, it changes movement. In 3 or 4 hours, your troops can move farther than in just 1 hour. We learned in my first video that a unit can move 2 steps in 1 turn. This is true for a 1 hour turn. If the turn lasts longer, the unit can move 2 steps during the first hour and then a bonus of 1 step per bonus hour, 1 step per hour if the unit belongs to the first player. Second player's units get a bonus of 2 steps per hour. In our example of a 4-hour long turn, first player units can move 2 steps plus a bonus of 3 steps, and second player units can move 2 steps plus a bonus of 6 steps. Fine, so first player units can move 5 steps in total and second players 8. No, not exactly. In fact, here is how it works. In a multi-hour turn, a player moves all his units 2 steps, only the basic 2 steps. And then he can use the bonus movement, but just to strengthen existing positions. What does it mean? It means that a unit moving with these bonus steps must end its movement stacked or adjacent to a friendly block. Look at this example. This is a 3-hour turn. As the second player, Confederate red units get 2 standard movement steps plus a bonus of 4. And first, they spend their regular 2 steps, 1, 2. And then they can spend the 4 bonus steps, but only if they end their movement stacked or adjacent to a friendly unit. So for example, a unit could not directly move to this position because it is neither stacked nor adjacent to a friendly unit. But the first unit can move to here where it is adjacent to a friendly unit. And then the second one can now move to extend the line, because now it is adjacent to a friendly unit. So remember, every turn gives you the same 2 steps of free movement for each of your units, whether it's a 1 hour or 10-hour turn, and beyond this unchanging base, additional hours give you bonus steps that only allow you to reinforce an existing line. And so, 3 1-hour turns are not at all the same as 1 3-hour turn. A lot of small 1-hour turns give you a lot more freedom in your movement. And I'm telling you this precisely because second player can choose to make turns shorter. At the beginning of every turn, players determine the length of the turn as we just saw. This length depends only on the number of units already on the map. But then the second player can decide to shorten this duration. If the standard calculation gives a 4-hour turn, the second player can decide to make it a 3, 2 or even a 1-hour turn. This is the second player privilege. The second player is the one who decides the pace of the battle. And so, this is the privilege of the Confederate player until he declares a withdraw general order and becomes the first player. Fine, but here we are talking only about movement, because if we talk about combat, the duration of the turn doesn't change anything. A unit can attack once per turn, whatever the duration of the turn. As you remember, attack is a kind of movement, and as part of its attack, a unit moves regardless of any cost in steps. So, even if the turn lasts longer, a unit cannot attack more, nor better. The duration of the turn doesn't change anything to the attack. And so, this is another reason why the second player would like to shorten the turns. In 1 3-hour turn, he can attack only once, while in 3 1-hour turns, he can attack 3 times. And finally, you can just, as the second player, choose to shorten the turn duration to save time, because with 5, 6 or 7-hour turns, the game will end far more quickly than with shortened turns. If each turn only lasted 1 hour, the whole game would last up to 49 turns, and the attacker needs most of these turns to deploy and exploit his attacks. So the Confederate players, who is the second player at start, just have to declare that he shortens each turn to 1 hour. Easy, no? No, because if the second player shortens a turn, he must declare an attack or a withdraw general order at the end of his turn. If you shorten the turn, that's because you are planning something, an attack or a withdrawal. You cannot shorten the turn and stay on a whole general order. But on the other hand, if the turn begins with one of the 2 players having declared an attack general order, the turn lasts only 1 hour. The turn duration formula stands for hold and withdrawal only turns. So, now you should start to figure out the big picture. At the beginning of the game, the attacker is the Confederate player. There are very few units on the map, and so according to the formula, whatever the general orders, turn length is always 1 hour. And mainly, the Confederate player will try to attack, because that's why he is here in Gettysburg. But attacking turn after turn, he will spend his tokens without drawing new ones, so his hand will slowly vanish. And at some point, he will have to declare a hold general order, just to rebuild his hand. With the hold order, he must comply with the formula that gives the length of a turn, but with several hours within a turn, he will draw several tokens each turn, and he will quickly restore his hand. And doing that, he also gives bonus movement to his opponent, who can reorganize his defense line. As the second player, he can choose to shorten the turn duration. So in this example, if the computed turn duration is 5 hours, he can shorten it to 4 hours because he only needs 4 tokens to fill his hand. Then he chooses the attack general order. He cannot stay under hold order after shortening the turn, and he starts attacking again. And you got it. This is the general pace of the battle. Until being in a bad situation, red player declares a withdraw general order, and the Union player becomes the new second player. And from this point on, this is up to him, the Union player, to decide the duration of the turn. The second player is always the one who decides the pace of the game. Note that the Union player, in general, chooses to keep the turns as long as possible to end the battle as quickly as possible. Okay, now you know how to deal with turn's length, and you begin to master the meaning and flow of general orders. Just a last rule before going on. Let's suppose you are under a hold general order. Your opponent attacks and at least one of your units loses a battle. When your own turn comes, this unit must withdraw. This is a non-voluntary withdrawal. And at the end of your turn, you can choose your next general order. If you choose to withdraw, that means that all your army will withdraw after the blow. If you choose to attack, that means perhaps that you want to counter-attack after the blow. The problem arises if you prefer to stay under the hold general order. In this case, you must discard 2 tokens from your hand. That's the cost to pay to stay under the hold general order after losing a battle. And voila! Isn't it beautiful? And we could stay like this, staring endlessly at this final screen, but there is still one major topic we have to learn, and this is reinforcements. At the very beginning of the game, the map is empty, almost empty. Only 2 Union units from Buford's cavalry divisions are on the field. The rest of the 2 armies are slowly converging on Gettysburg, but neither player knows exactly when they will arrive. And this uncertainty is simulated with time and reinforcement tokens. The first day of the battle is July the 1st, and on this day, each player knows that some reinforcements will come to the battlefield. This is shown as time tokens. 5 such tokens for the Union player and 7 for the Confederate player. Each token bears the name of the road from which the reinforcements will come. So Union player knows that during this first day of battle, he will get 5 divisions as reinforcements. 3 from the Emmitsburg Road, 1 from the Baltimore Road, and 1 from the Taneytown Road. The Confederate player knows that during the same period, he will get 7 divisions as reinforcements, 5 from the Chambersburg Road, 1 from the Mummasburg Road, and 1 from the Harrisburg Road. Okay, so both players know exactly what reinforcement they will get, but they don't know when. The reinforcement schedule is random. At the beginning of the game, Confederate time tokens are mixed with 10 dummy tokens called rumors and shuffled face down and distributed 1 per turn from July 1st 7 am to July 2nd 7 am. The same with Union tokens from 9 am because Union player has 2 time tokens less. And then the first game turn begins. It lasts 1 hour. And inside each player's turn sequence, 1 new phase must be added, reinforcements, just after attack and before regular movement. On the first turn, Blue Union player doesn't get any reinforcement because he has no time token on the first turn. But when Confederate Red player's turn comes, during his reinforcement phase, he flips his time token face up. If it's a rumor, nothing happens. And players keep on doing that until reinforcements at last arrive. For example, turn number 2, it's again a 1 hour long turn, and again Blue Union player gets no reinforcements. Red player, reinforcement phase, and this time this is not a rumor, this is the Harrisburg Road token. Confederate reinforcement will arrive this turn from the Harrisburg Road. Okay, thanks to time tokens, players know when they get reinforcements and from what road. But what are these reinforcements? What divisions? Here are all the units in the game, and all these units will at some point enter the map as reinforcements. They are grouped into divisions and there is a special reinforcement token for each division. So, at the beginning of the game, during setup, each division is linked to the road it will arrive from, just by randomly putting face down reinforcement tokens as indicated on the map on the entry points. For the Union player, that gives Kilpatrick's token on the Taneytown entry point. This is a very special division because it's a cavalry division and it will be the last one to enter the battlefield. Then 3 tokens on the Baltimore Road, 3 on the Emmitsburg Road, and the last one on the Taneytown Road on top of Kilpatrick. And the same for Confederate player, but with a twist. Confederate divisions are grouped into corps. Corps 1, 2, and 3. Their tokens are shuffled, face down, 1 stack per corps. Then 1 Corps 2 token is put on Harrisburg Road, then a second one on Mummasburg Road, and all the remaining tokens goes to the Chambersburg Road. This entry point is special. The 3 triangles unfold from the Chambersburg Road from the right to the left. So, the first division to enter as reinforcements will be the closest to the road, the Corps 3 divisions. Then the 1 remaining Corps 2 division, then the 3 Corps 1 divisions. So, as the Confederate player, you should remember that first, the whole 3rd Corps will arrive from the Chambersburg Road, then the 2nd Corps split between the 3 roads, and finally the 1st Corps from the Chambersburg Road again. Note that at any time during the game, each player can pick at the top token of each of his own entry point. This is important because he will have to take decisions when optimizing his hand of artillery tokens. So for example, if he has to discard 1 token to keep his hand under the 8 card limit, here he can decide to discard the Reynolds token because he knows that Reynolds will not arrive to the battlefield anytime soon. Now, back to our example. You remember it is turn 2 and the Confederate player draws a time token that triggers the arrival of reinforcements from the Harrisburg Road. So, he flips the top reinforcement token that is on the Harrisburg entry point. This is Johnson's division. Confederate player gets the 2 units that form this division and he puts them on the edge of the map close to the Harrisburg entry point. Note that these blocks stay face down. Their identity is secret and the Union player doesn't know exactly what division just arrived. And now these units must actually enter the battlefield. Reinforcement is a type of movement, like regular movement or attack or withdrawal. They all are different types of movement. And they are always played in this order. Withdrawals first, then attacks, then reinforcements, then regular movements. WARM, warm, easy to remember. So, let's say that it's a red player's turn, he is under whole general order, so he has nothing to withdraw and he cannot attack. He goes directly to the R letter of warm, reinforcements. He has 2 units to enter the map through the Harrisburg Road. Reinforcement is a special type of movement by which a unit can move to any position on the border of its entry area. Look. There is a line around the entry triangle, and 2 areas are adjacent to this line. These are the entry areas. The reinforcement movement doesn't spend any step. You just move your units to a position on the border of these areas. And that's it. Note that just after the reinforcement move, red player goes to the M part of his turn, the regular movement. But he cannot move his 2 units again because reinforcement is a type of movement and a given unit can move only once per turn. This is the regular way of entering the map as reinforcement. And as you see, reinforcement units can just cross one area and must stop. They cannot go very far, and if the front line is on the other side of the map, it can take a long time after that to reach it with 2-step regular movements. That's why reinforcement units can use road movement. Let's take another example. This blue unit must enter the map as reinforcement. It can enter as regular reinforcement to any position bordering its entry area, okay, but it can do far better thanks to the Baltimore Road. Easy. When a unit enters the map as reinforcement, it can move as far as it wants as long as it stays on the road. Look, if you follow the road from the entry point, you can go down to the outskirts of Gettysburg and then you can turn at the crossroads and go on. And at the end of its movement, the unit must occupy a position actually crossed by the road. It can end here, for example, but not here or here. Okay, so as you see, road movement is very convenient, and the road network opens the whole map to reinforcement units. Fine, but as you guess, there are some limitations. First, only 1 unit per hour can enter by road through a given entry point. So let's suppose that blue player on his turn draws this time token that gives him some reinforcement from the Baltimore Road. He flips the top reinforcement token for this road. This is Hancock. Fine, but Hancock's division is made of 3 units, 3 blocks. So he can move one and only one of them by road. And what about the other 2? The other 2 units must stay there. They cannot move by road because only 1 unit can per hour. And they cannot either enter the map by the regular way because you cannot use both methods, regular and road, at the same time through the same entry point. And so, in this case, the other 2 units stay on the edge of the map, waiting for the next hours to entry one by one by road. Note that next turn, for example, they can choose the regular way and enter both at the same time. But if they choose to enter by road again, only 1 unit can enter. Okay, and because units can stay out of the map waiting to enter one by one through the same road, it can happen that another reinforcement enters through another road. In our example, next turn, blue player draws another reinforcement on the Taneyton Road. This is Sickles' division with 3 new units. When it's his reinforcement phase, blue player can enter a Hancock unit from Baltimore Road, as he did before, and this doesn't prevent another reinforcement unit to use road movement also, provided it enters by another entry point, here, Taneyton Road. But, there is always a but, any given road section and any crossroads can only be used once per hour. So here, the first unit used this road. And so the second unit can use its own road up to the point where it crosses the first road, because even a crossroads cannot be used twice during the same hour. Sickles' unit cannot cross Hancock's path to go to the town of Gettysburg, for example. This reinforcement movement, for example, is possible. And you might say it's no big deal. That same unit could continue on the road next turn. But no, road movement is only for reinforcement movement. Once on the map, a unit cannot use road movement anymore. So, this unit from the next turn onwards can only rely on regular 2-step movement. Fine, now there are also special considerations because Gettysburg was on the Union territory. In other words, before the battle, this town, these roads, belong to the Union player. So, first, the Confederate player cannot use a road special movement before some previous scouting of the entry points. In other words, for each of the 3 Confederate entry points, the first reinforcement unit must enter through regular movement. And only after that, from the next turn onwards, other units can use a road movement from this entry point. And the Confederate player cannot use road movement through the town of Gettysburg itself. For this rule, we consider that the town is made of its 2 center areas, so Confederate reinforcement road movement cannot go any further than these positions, while Blue Union player is totally free to use all roads wherever he wants. I say totally free, but of course that's not true. Of course, any unit using reinforcement movement, either regular or by road, must stop as soon as it bumps on an enemy field of fire. At the beginning of the game, the Union player has only the 2 buffered cavalry units. Let's suppose he places them like this. If the Confederate player gets reinforcements on the Chambersburg Road, 2 units from Pender's division, his first move will be, because it must be, a regular reinforcement move. So next turn, with his second unit, he can use the road, but only to this position. He cannot go any further because of buffered units' field of fire. Note that the Union player cannot place his units on positions on the border of any Confederate entry area. So, for the Chambersburg entry point, that means not on any of these positions. Beware, that doesn't mean that Union player cannot at all block a Confederate entry area. For example, if Buffer's unit is placed here, this placement is valid because it doesn't touch the Confederate entry area, but its own field of fire prevents Confederate units from entering through the left area. The only way a Confederate unit can enter the map through the Chambersburg entry point is, in this case, through the right area and so not by road. And finally, note that a reinforcement unit can try to change its entry point to avoid this kind of trap set by his enemy. Here is how it works. First turn, first hour, red player draws his first reinforcement unit for the Chambersburg Road. And this is Pender's division. So, both Pender's units are placed on the edge of the map, ready to enter the battle. They can enter, as we just saw, as soon as the next red player's reinforcement phase. But red player can choose not to enter his units. He does nothing the first hour. His units were due to enter, they just give up. Next turn, next hour, during his reinforcement phase, red player can decide to transfer his units to the next entry point, Mummasburg Road. Next hour, again, he can enter the map here by Mummasburg Road, or he can go on and transfer to the next entry point, Harrisburg Road. And finally, one more hour later, units can enter the map at Harrisburg entry point. So just keep in mind that you are not bound to enter your units where the reinforcement token tells you to. You can always transfer your units to other entry points, but it takes time, 4 hours in our example, that's a maximum. Note that a unit cannot be transferred the turn it arrives in play. Here Pender's units did nothing on their first hour. And units cannot be transferred and enter the game during the same hour. Here Pender's units entered on the 4th hour, while their last transfer was during the 3rd hour. And we talk about hours, not turns. So it is possible that a 4-hour transfer takes place within a single turn that lasts 4 hours. More on that in a few minutes. Before going on, you have to know this particular case. A unit can leave the map as regular movement or as withdrawal movement. Then it stays there on the edge of the map, just where it left. And on any following turn, the player can decide to move it back to the map. And this is a regular movement again. This is not a reinforcement. Such a unit cannot enter the map through road movement, for example. And finally, note that if you have units on the edge of the map, whether because they left or because they are reinforcements on an entry point waiting to enter, these units are still counted when evaluating the duration of a turn. They are already in play, even if not on the map. Okay, and now brace yourself and get ready for the last example of this video, where I will show you a full reinforcement situation spread over a multi-hour turn. July 1st, 3 p.m., there are 9 Confederate units and 10 Union units on the map, and both players are under hold general orders, so the duration of the turn should be 4 hours. Being the second player, the Confederate player can choose to shorten this length, but no, he decides to keep it like this. This will be a 4-hour long turn. And this is blue player's turn. W, no withdrawal. A, no attack. R, we must check reinforcements. There are 4 hours in the turn, so 4 time tokens to flip. The first one is a rumor, nothing. The second one, a rumor again. But the third one is an actual reinforcement that arrives from the Baltimore Road. And then another rumor. So, finally, blue player got 1 new division as reinforcements. Note that he could have flipped more than 1 no rumor token and get more than 1 division during this turn. Okay. So, 1 reinforcement, but during the 3rd hour of the turn. The turn lasts from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. and the reinforcements arrive from 5 p.m. And this is important. The exact hour the reinforcement arrives is important and should be noted by keeping the time token on its exact hour. Now, blue player flips the top reinforcement token on Baltimore Road. It's Sedgwick. He gets the 3 Sedgwick units on the edge of the map ready to enter through the Baltimore Road. Okay, and this is still the reinforcement phase, the phase where blue player can now move his reinforcements. So, he takes his first Sedgwick unit and moves it by road. Now, he has still 2 units to bring to the map, but you remember, only 1 unit per hour can enter the map through a given entry point. So, blue player cannot enter another unit. He cannot this hour. But, in this same turn, there is 1 hour left. The first unit enters at 5 p.m., so another unit can enter by that same road at 6 p.m., always during that same 4-hour turn. Fine, so this is still the reinforcement phase, and blue player enters a second unit from Sedgwick Division by the Baltimore Road. And he does exactly the same movement as with the first unit. Note, this is important, that even if the turn lasts 4 hours, Union player can only enter 2 units because the time token were drawn for the 3rd hour of the turn with only 2 hours left to enter units, so 2 units only. And the reinforcement phase is over. Blue player has completed all his possible reinforcement movements. Now it's the regular movement phase, the M from the WARM acronym. And so blue player can move his units. Not those that are blocked by enemy fields of fire, of course, but he can move the others. 2 steps plus 1 bonus step per bonus hour. And that gives 2 steps plus 3 bonus steps. And you could think that the 2 reinforcement units, Sedgwick units, cannot move. Because of the rule, only 1 movement per unit per turn. These 2 units already moved during the reinforcement phase. Reinforcement is a type of movement. But, because this is a multi-hour turn, these units can still benefit from bonus steps. Reinforcement units benefit from bonus steps. And now please pay attention. The bonus steps a reinforcement unit gets depend on the number of hours it has still until the end of the turn. Thus, because the second Sedgwick unit arrived during the last hour of the turn, it has no hour left until the end of the turn, so no bonus step. While the first Sedgwick unit arrived 1 hour before and gets 1 bonus step for the 1 hour left it has until the end of the turn. And with this bonus step, it can make a movement to a position stacked or adjacent to a friendly unit. This movement, for example. Yes, I know this is the more complex rule in this game, and it can be a little bit confusing to handle. Look, let's suppose that in the same example, blue player draws the Baltimore Road time token as its first token of the turn for the first hour. Now we are at the reinforcement phase. With 4 hours before them, all 3 units from Sedgwick's division can enter the map by road. But here is the trick. Because only 1 unit can enter by a given road every hour, we should break the reinforcement process hour by hour. First hour, the first unit enters the map. And when I play the Guns of Gettysburg, I use neutral wooden cubes to show how many hours a reinforcement unit has left. Here, because there are 3 hours left until the end of the turn, I put 3 cubes beside the reinforcement unit. Next hour of the same turn, the second unit can enter, and with 2 hours left, it gets 2 cubes. And third hour, the third unit can enter by that same road, and it gets 1 cube because there is 1 hour left after its arrival. And now this is the regular movement phase. The 3 reinforcement units did already move during the reinforcement phase, but they can still enjoy their bonus steps. With 3 cubes, the first unit had 3 hours left, so 3 bonus steps. It can move like this. With 2 cubes, 2 hours left, the second unit has 2 bonus steps, not enough to stack with the first unit, because of the obstructed position. So, it decides to line up here for 1 step. And the last unit with 1 cube, so 1 bonus step, joins it. And voila, here is how reinforcement units can use bonus steps in a multi-hour turn. And the same applies to withdrawing units. In the same way, in a multi-hour turn, a unit that does a withdrawal movement during the withdraw phase can still benefit from bonus steps during the ensuing movement phase. And this is the end of my 3rd video. And we could say from now on that you are able to play a full game of the Guns of Gettysburg. But you know there is still 1 video, the 4th in the series, but a video about funny things, about historical chrome, those little details that make a good game a masterpiece. Cavalry brigades, night turns, forced marches and fieldworks, and of course the Reynolds Iron Brigade.